Everything that I'm sharing in this video are things that have worked for me. They may work for you, they may not. Feel free to try them on, and if they work for you, if they give you insight, if they make you feel good, then please feel free to keep them and share them with other people. If they don't work for you, that's totally fine. Just leave it, and maybe you'll learn something from it anyways. And if not, that's totally fine. Hey everyone, it's Kaz. Please join me as I take a few deep breaths in, out. Once again, in and out. Thank you. I'm somebody who's been on a fitness journey since I was 15. I'm 27 now, and I've learned a lot about nutrition, I've learned a lot about fitness, and I've learned a lot about myself through that process. So I like to take the approach in my life that how I do anything is how I do everything. So the way that I approach my food is the same way that I'm going to approach my spirituality, is the same way I'm going to approach my work, it's the same way I'm going to approach my relationships. I like to treat things as experiments. When I make small changes within myself, I like to pay attention to see how those changes are reflected outside of me, etc. So for me, approaching food with intention and being introspective, paying attention to the experiences that come up for me in regards to my food intake, doing all of that has really allowed me to understand myself at a deeper level and actually do a lot of shadow work, things that were reflected in my diet, things that were reflected in the way that I perceived food and perceived myself. So approaching food with intention and having structures of accountability and different practices that I adhere to on a daily basis really have shaped the experience of my life and allowed me to go further on this journey than I ever thought was possible when I started. Secondly, we can't remove our body from our experience of life. So the more that we take care of our bodies, the more that we understand our bodies, because our bodies are magnetically attached to our spirits, and the way that we treat our bodies is parallel to the way that we treat ourselves. As above, so below. There's nothing that we do to our bodies that we're not doing to our own mind. So the more love and attention we put on ourselves and our bodies, the more capable our bodies become of being a vessel for higher spiritual awakening. I mean, if you just think about the chakra system in the body, there's 3 lower chakras and there's 3 higher chakras, and they're connected by the heart chakra. So even if we're extremely spiritual, if we're doing, all these practices, if our lower 3 chakras, that's where diet impacts us the most. If those chakras are out of alignment, if we're not properly feeding our body, we are not actually allowing for the most optimal flow of energy into those higher states of consciousness. And a lot of the times we block our access. So on to the practices. So the first practice that I've been doing for quite a while now is intermittent fasting. Intermittent fasting, for me, it just made so much sense. It made so much sense. For some reason, we're conditioned to think that we need to eat 3 meals, but it's an old marketing campaign that 3 square meals a day is what we're supposed to do. But if you really actually think about it, you go back to our ancestry, they didn't eat 3 square meals a day. And we're working with this essentially the same biological systems that we had back then. So we're flooding our systems with overconsumption. It goes along the lines, and this is where you really get into the spiritual aspect of nutrition, which is overconsumption of anything is going to have a really dilutionary impact on our experience of life. See, if we're eating 3 meals a day and then we're snacking in between, we're eating right when we wake up to right before we go to sleep, we're not allowing for space. We're not allowing for proper digestion. And this, it flows into every other area of life. If you work out way too much and you don't allow for recovery, you're not going to build muscle optimally. If you are only ever doing meditative practices and you're never actually bringing those practices into 3-dimensional reality and into your relationships, you're not expanding yourself to the fullest capacity. If you're only ever on social media or consuming information and you're not giving yourself space and time to process and come up with your own internal information, you're also doing yourself a disservice because you're just over consuming. And it's so easy to fall into that trap of overconsumption and thinking that we need to consume more in order to get more value. Whereas, really, if we allow space and time for ourselves to digest, whether that be food, whether that be information, whether that be downloads that we get from our spirit, from our practices, regardless of whatever it is, if we give time and space, we're able to extract more value from it and we're able to be more present to the impact of that food that we're eating. So it also shifts our frame of mind from living to eat to eating to live. This is one of the really big shifts that happened for me when I started with all of this practice. And something that I used to really struggle with was I would think about food all the time. All I could think about was the next time I was going to eat. All I could think about was what I was going to eat. I was food obsessed. I relied on the dopamine hit from eating whatever food that I was eating at the time to fuel me, and it motivated me and it kept me going. Whereas, like, the rest of my life really didn't do that for me at that point of time. It really allowed for me to shift from relying on food for fulfillment to really orienting my life in a way that I have a fulfilling life and I don't need to rely on the processed foods and sugary foods in order to actually feel good in my life. It also forces us to pay attention to non consumption when we're in our phase of digestion. The point is really to look at these ideas and see how they interpolate between all different aspects. So, in my experience, in the times where I'm not eating, I actually develop so much more of a capacity to focus on what I'm doing. And it puts me in a different mind space. It puts me in a different space of creativity. And I really enjoy actually the time when I'm not eating, sometimes even more than the times that I am eating. And I'm learning continually how to balance out how much to eat, what kind of foods to eat to kind of keep that flow going. But it's been a revelation in my life, and it's not something that I was actually present to before I started intermittent fasting, was how good I felt when I'm fasted. Keep that in mind. I was somebody that struggled with weight for quite a while. Historically, I tended to put on fat more easily, and I had a hard time losing the fat. So for me, having strict eating windows allowed for me to eat foods that satiated me, to eat foods that were nutritious and whole. And because I knew that my time window to eat was limited, it made me more conscious about the foods that I did choose to eat. So all of that wrapped up is why I still continue to do intermittent fasting to this day, and why it's one of the practices that have really transformed my relationship with food and eating in general. All right. So number 2, mindful eating. So whenever I do eat during my eating windows, I've made it a practice, and this is thanks to a lot of mentors that I have, to be grateful for whatever's in front of me, whatever I'm eating. It's not a religious thing. I didn't grow up in a religious family. So I think about how that food got there. I think about everything it took for that food to get onto that plate. I think about all the hands that it touched. I think about the farmer and the work that the farmer had to put into growing the vegetables and the crops. Yeah, I don't eat meat now, but I eat fish and I eat eggs. So I think about whatever, life was in that food. I think about just everything that it took for that food to be here, basically. When I take that moment, really, it makes the food taste so much better. It brings me into the present moment, and when I'm in the present moment, the food tastes better. If I'm not in the present moment, I'm not even tasting the food. I've scarfed down food in my life so many times, half consciously, and I don't even remember eating it by the end. So taking that moment to be conscious, to be present while I'm eating, allows me to enjoy my food more. It allows me to enjoy the time more. It allows me to be more full and more satiated after I finish eating. And I pay more attention to the small details of the food. It's something that I didn't do when I was younger, that I've developed gradually over time, is being able to really pay attention to the subtle flavors, the subtle textures, the little things in food that really make it a gift of an experience. I also take extra attention to eat slowly, to chew mindfully. I used to scarf down my food, and it would take me so like I would not get full. No matter how much I ate, I felt like I wouldn't get full. And I would bypass my feeling of being full and I would just go straight to feeling stuffed all the time. And so I thought there was something, wrong with me. I thought that's just how I was. And when I started chewing mindfully, when I started, taking 10 to 20 bites of my food before I swallowed it, I got to experience like feeling satisfied with my food, with the amount that I've eaten before I got overly stuffed. That really made a difference for me. Just all in all, mindfully eating had allowed me in my life an opportunity to become aware of unconscious habits that I developed over time in regards to eating food that I didn't realize that I had. They just were the way that it was. I've had so many experiences with delicious food at this point where it's almost made me cry, or it has made me cry, just because I'm so grateful for it and I'm so present to the minute intricacies of whatever is in the food. And it's been such a gift to be able to experience that, honestly. So, number three, experimenting with different foods. So, I've tried a lot of different diets over my time. I started with IIFYM, which was If It Fits Your Macros, which is just macronutrient based dieting, where I would track everything that I ate. And so long as it fit within a certain amount of carbohydrates, fats, and proteins, it would work with my diet. I've tried keto, I've tried vegan, I've tried vegetarian. I realized that certain diets would fulfill certain needs and not others. What I did was I treated it like an experiment. And instead of being tied to a diet, like when I was vegan, I was eating all kinds of foods that I could feel didn't feel good. Like I was eating the processed fake meat stuff. I was eating vegan desserts. There was one point where my go-to snack was a vegan hot dog with vegan cheese on it, and I put ketchup on it and I put it in a vegan bun, and that was like my go-to. And it didn't feel good after. It tasted great. I was like 15 years old. I could tell that it didn't fulfill me and it wasn't what my body needed. There were certain times in my life where I would eat certain foods because they fit within the dietary restrictions of whatever I was doing, and I'd be identified with that dietary restriction. So I'd be identified with being vegan. So I would eat vegan foods even if they didn't feel good. I'd be identified with being keto. So I'd eat keto foods even if they didn't feel good, et cetera, et cetera. And what I came to learn is that I don't have to be beholden to any particular diet or any particular diet identity, that I could actually take little things from each diet that worked for me. So with veganism, what worked for me was whole plant-based foods, was an emphasis on eating lots of vegetables, on getting a lot of greens in. I've been making a vegan smoothie almost every day since I was 15 at this point, and that's been a staple of my life and my diet. And what didn't work was the fake processed meats, the sugar. Sugar is vegan, and all of those things. So taking what works and learning what doesn't work from any particular diet is a great, great opportunity to figure out your optimal diet. In addition, I've taken some genetic tests, specifically a 3x4 genetic test, and it gave me specific dietary tips based on my DNA. So I implemented that as well, and that's also helped me to learn about my own dietary needs. And actually, I found that because I had been experimenting for so long with my diet, so many of the things that I came to conclusions with for my diet, like that dairy doesn't really work for me, intermittent fasting is ideal for me, and that there are certain things in regards to veganism that don't work for me, those all were reflected in my DNA test. So when we experiment, we really give ourselves a chance to get to know ourselves through experience. So like I said before, how I do anything is how I do everything. And I treat my life like it's an experiment in all kinds of different ways. And this is just one of those ways. So really being honest with yourself about how foods make you feel, being honest with yourself about what foods work for you and what foods don't work for you, and being honest with yourself about whether you're consuming too much or you're not consuming enough. Just, being able to tune into your body is really, really important. And it gives us a foundation upon which we can manifest things into our lives, upon which we can grow into the highest version of ourselves, and really unlock our full potential. If you enjoyed, please like, subscribe, and leave a comment down below about your journey with food and how it's impacted your spirituality. And I'll see you in the next video. Bye, everyone.